Welcome, everybody. We are doing another interview here. I'm excited to have Jonathon with me. Jonathon, thanks for joining me tonight.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Now, we want to talk about the upcoming conference as part of the Atlanta Quality Assurance Association, headed up by Costa, their president. They'll be having a conference coming up here in September that you're going to be part of for QA Atlanta. Now, you're not based in the U.S., are you, Jonathon?
No, so I'm based in the UK. So a bit of a giveaway with the hoodie, really. But yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking on Wednesday. I think my session's at 1 p.m.
Perfect. And now you've got, I know you'll be on the panel with myself, Jason, Tariq. We're hoping to add a fifth panelist to the group discussing some of the topics around AI, what's top of mind. I know you're doing some work as well in that space on some different strategies for standards around it. Could you maybe give us just some of what you're kind of focused on right now in that space, as well as I know you have a session on COVID and some work with MIT in the US?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking forward to the discussion panel. I'm sure it's going to be really interesting. But like you said, I know you're doing some work with the Presidential Innovation Fellows on US standards for AI and AI for good. So I guess I'm doing the kind of the equivalent on the other side of the pond. So I'm working with the European Commission AI Alliance to look at some ethic guidelines for trustworthy AI. So that's some very high level expert group around that to understand some of the challenges and putting those place across Europe. And the other thing I'm contributing to is the ISO standard 29119 part 11, which is actually around guidelines for kind of testing AI systems, which is where I'm going to be talking about in my session. So I've spent quite a lot of time working on testing AI as a platform, so cognitive engineering, so looking at how you test AI systems. And just onto the kind of the session, if my session's going to be quite interesting. I'm like you mentioned in the intro, I'm working with the guys at MIT, and I have been since the start of COVID, really. So they reached out to me because I'd done some work on a smart city project for Copenhagen around contact tracing and using GPS and synthetically being able to generate billions of historical transactions. So they reached out and said, could we do something very similar? So I've been working with them very closely around managing their QA efforts. So a lot of volunteers, over 2,500 volunteers from every part of the globe, testers, developers, anyone who's just trying to help contribute towards the helping the PathCheck Foundation, which is a foundation that's been set up to help with the COVID outbreak and contract tracing. So only recently, which is I've started working on some gains testing. So that's the Google and Apple exposure notification. So that's something you're going to start seeing pushed onto your device quite soon, and that will be the Bluetooth proximity information. So it passes your details to other devices, and this will be rolled out across all devices, so that we're leveraging that capability and working really closely with Apple and Google to make sure we test that, because there's the real challenges around calibration of each type of device. So I'm actually running behind me, I'm running iOS 14 on the Apple developer kit for the ARM platform. So part of it is checking some of the next generation devices are also going to be able to support this, and also test some really complex scenarios that we weren't really expecting when we started out. So some really interesting stuff, and I'll obviously be talking about it in a bit more detail in my session.
Yeah, people need to check this out. I think a lot of questions come around the topics you've mentioned of how do you test these AI platforms and systems, and the accuracy of them is really important, right? Because if we get this wrong, these platforms and systems are being used to make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are hugely impactful to people's livelihood and their lives. When we talk about them being used in the criminal justice system for judges to help make decisions, there's a lot of things where this information is being utilized where it's making and helping humans determine outcomes for other humans. So, really important, I think. And you touched on also the, AI for good use, and how do we, as with anything, right? Technology can be used for good purposes and for not so good purposes. So it's a critical time, I think, in technology of people understanding, especially the testing community, how to be a part of this and effectively help with testing these systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest challenges probably with the contact tracing and COVID was the lack of trust, and especially with governments like here in the UK, the NHS X was a platform that tried to utilize gains run by GCHQ, and unfortunately it never made it because of privacy concerns. And so when we started the project with MIT, it was a privacy by design. So, part of it was no data would ever leave your phone. You could control all of your data, and you could make sure that, you can control when you pass that information and make sure it's secure. So some real challenges, and it meant that we had to look at new approaches, which usually you've got the kind of the insight on a lot of stuff that I've been talking about with Shift Right. And I did a TED talk on cognitive learning, so learning from the right hand side, so learning using the APMs and the what they kind of class as AI ops, so the operational tools, pulling all this data together and then trying to do some predictive analytics of behavior. And I think it's important that we are able to take responsibility for our own data and make sure that we know exactly where it's going. And I guess with GDPR and the California data privacy kind of challenge, it's really important. And I think a lot of organizations are still got this challenge around data quality and making sure they're not using production data, and they're not just synthetically generating data. And one of the big areas we'll be talking about in the panel discussion will be about bias. So cognitive bias is a real challenge about how that data is actually synthesized. So that was one of our challenges. And like you said, it makes a massive difference to people's lives. So with the GPS or GPX information, if you're in a building, you only have longitude and latitude, you can't tell whether or not people are on top of each other, and that means that you get a lot more false positives. So we've got to be able to trust the AI and what it's actually doing. So it's really important to get that right, and that's the great thing about open source and these volunteer projects is you can get involved, and there's nothing stopping you contributing to that and actually making a difference in the future, and like you said, for AI for good, really.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we talk about now, this being a virtual conference, you're able to join and contribute from across the pond, as you said it. So for folks out there that are looking to sign up, that haven't signed up yet for this event, I think you've touched on some really good skills they can get exposed to. And like you said, awareness and access to some of these projects where you can get involved and start getting, involved and experience in these platforms, in these types of projects that they are out there if people are interested, right? To start getting involved. I know a lot of people say, well, my company's not doing it, but really right now, what's your thoughts on, skills people should be brushing up on, getting exposure, maybe some places they could go to learn about some of these projects you mentioned where they could volunteer their time?
Absolutely. And so I think it is a perfect time to be putting yourself out there, really, and getting involved in these type of projects. And that's kind of really what one of my focuses for the talk is a call for action, is how can you get involved, and what's the best way of doing that. And that's not only for things like the MIT project. That's, like we discussed with Jason and the rest of the guys, it's around things like the international standards, being part of your country, representing your country on the direction that these kind of standards evolve. And I think it's really important to give everyone's viewpoint, because everyone's now going to be responsible for these systems, and it's the next generation of testing challenges that we really need to address. And I mentioned I'd be talking about the gated approach, which the gated.ai approach, which I've been working on, and it includes exactly what you said around accuracy. So that's the A out of gated, but it's a different type of way of testing things. So you're not going to get the same level as you'd be using with, you know, a fault, you know, looking at assertion or something. You really have to look at all these new challenges, and we talked about weighted nodes and all sorts of other stuff last time, but you know, there is these new challenges and you've got to understand some of the base foundations. So, you know, what can you do to really get your skills up to date? And you know, there's obviously some fantastic platforms out there where you can go off and you can learn about stuff. The best one I'd recommend from Google is Kaggle, and Kaggle is a machine learning AI crowd platform which allows you to go in, start a project and work with other people about learning your skills. And they actually, the sample project which you start with is the Titanic, and trying to understand with what limited data how people died in what order, and do some predictions around there, and it'll give you all the tools that you need to go through that. And it's really interesting because obviously it's very different to what the results were in say for instance the movie, where you know it was based on class or gender. In actual fact it wasn't, and you'll find that out by going through and analyzing the data. So you know, don't dismiss, you know, the fact that, you know, maybe you've not got a data science background. You know, look at it from the skills that you do have. And you know, I always say data engineering over science, in the sense of understanding the metadata, understanding the context behind that is much more important than the science aspect. You know, that's the easy part. The hard part is understanding the data. So you know, go out, have a go, and you know, don't be afraid to ask. And I think that's what we're going to try and facilitate throughout the conference, is the ability for people to really get involved, and also to reach out to people who are involved with in the conference, and ask them for, you know, extra tips or guidance. You know, I think that's the great thing about this. It's bringing the world together closer, and that means we can all help each other out.
This is awesome. It sounds so great. I'm looking forward to it. Very excited for this. Jonathan, will encourage the folks to sign up. I think you've given them a lot of things to think about between now and then. So if you haven't yet signed up for QA Atlanta to hear Jonathan talk about some of these programs and projects and skills on how to test these AI platforms, I think you guys should tune in and join this event. I think there's going to be a lot of good insights there, and as you said, to connect us all globally. So we hope to see you all there. Jonathan, I look forward to the panel and the event. Thank you so much for sharing of your time tonight with us on your bank holiday. We appreciate it. And we will see you in just a few short weeks on the panel and at QA Atlanta. Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.